This is a presentation on proton pump inhibitors. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to learn the following: functions of proton pump, mechanism of gastric acid secretion, various receptors involved in acid secretion, various receptor antagonists that can reduce peptic acid secretions, important proton pump inhibitors, their molecular mechanism of action, uses of proton pump inhibitors, side effects of proton pump inhibitors, and synthesis of omeprazole. Working of proton pump. As we know, secretion of gastric acid in the stomach occurs through the activation of several receptors, and in the end the proton pump adds a proton, that is the hydrogen ion, leading to the final step in the synthesis and secretion of HCl. This occurs through activation of several receptors, the proton pump, and through the various ion channels. The H plus K plus ATPase pump works by pumping the hydrogen ions against the concentration gradient in lieu of the potassium ions. Since this occurs against the concentration gradient, it requires energy. This energy is obtained by the hydrolysis of ATP into ADP by the ATPase. The chloride ions in the hydrochloric acid are circulated through a separate channel. This in the end leads to formation of HCl into the canaliculus of the lumen of the stomach. The gastric acid secretion in the parietal cells is controlled by several receptors. The H2 receptors activated by histamine through cyclic AMP pathway. The second one, the muscarinic receptors, M3 receptors, which are activated by acetylcholine, and the CCK2 receptors, which are activated by gastrin. Both muscarinic and CCK2 receptors are calcium ion channel dependent pathways. So, histamine, acetylcholine, and gastrin in turn activate the H plus K plus ATPase pump, which is the last step in the synthesis of gastric acid. So here we are going to see the last step inhibitors, that is the proton pump inhibitors, as anti-secretory or anti-peptic ulcer agents. This slide shows the various antagonist and agonist which are used in peptic ulcer conditions or hyperacidic conditions. The first one is dicyclomine, which blocks the cholinergic receptor and it acts through the calcium ions. The second is cimetidine, which blocks the H2 or the histaminic receptor. The third one is misoprostol, which stimulates the prostaglandin receptor and which is used in NSAID induced ulcerative conditions. We are going to see in detail the omeprazole category compounds, that is the agents which act on the H plus K plus ATPase pump and inhibit the final step of gastric acid secretion by the parietal cells into the lumen of the stomach. Let us see the mechanism of action of PPIs. PPIs are prodrugs, that is they are activated to the active drug inside the body. They are acid labile and therefore have to be enteric coated before giving them orally as tablets or capsules. They are absorbed from the intestine and are activated in the acidic medium of the parietal cells. They irreversibly inhibit the H plus K plus ATPase pump in the gastric lumen. The important examples of PPIs include omeprazole, esomeprazole, lansoprazole, pantoprazole, and rabeprazole. Let us see the structure of PPIs? If you see the structures, you will understand that there is a basic nucleus which includes the pyridine, the methyl sulfonyl, and the benzimidazole. So, the basic nucleus of all PPIs is pyridinyl methyl sulfonyl benzimidazole. The various examples given here are omeprazole, esomeprazole, pantoprazole, lansoprazole, and rabeprazole. If you see the substitutions on the various drugs, you will understand that on the benzimidazole moiety, we have a substitution on position 5 or there is no substitution. On the pyridinyl moiety, we have substitution on position 3, 4, 5 or either of them. Now, when we go ahead, we will see the mechanism of action of these drugs. The activation of the PPI starts with protonation of the benzimidazole ring in the acidic pH of the parietal cells. This protonation in turn forms an spirointermediate which in presence of the acidic pH forms the sulfanic acid intermediate which is the actual drug. This sulfanic acid intermediate has the free SOH group which forms a transient pyridinium sulfonamide structure which forms a covalent bond with the SH of the cysteine residues in the proton pump of the stomach, that is the H plus K plus ATPase pump. This covalent linkage with the cysteine 813 of the H plus K plus ATPase pump inhibits the pump, thereby not allowing the acid to secrete over a long time. Though the plasma half-life of the drug is 60 to 90 minutes, we find due to this covalent linkage, the activity lasts for almost 24 hours. The other things that we need to know about PPIs are they are termed as hyposecretory agents. They are one of the most potent inhibitors of acid secretion available today. Apart from reducing the gastric acid secretion, they also reduce the pepsin activity, which in turn is responsible for the secretion of HCl. They promote mucosal healing as well as reduce pain. They have a long duration of action, that is more than 12 hours up to 24 hours. Therefore, they need to be taken only once a day. And their bioavailability is reduced by food. Therefore, they are given 1 hour before meal. Which are the conditions in which PPIs are useful? PPIs are used in the treatment of Helicobacter pylori infections along with antimicrobial agents. The second condition in which they are useful are peptic ulcers which are resistant or severe type. The third condition is GERD, that is gastroesophageal reflux disease. It is also known as reflux esophagitis. In this, the acid from the stomach gets refluxed up into the esophagus, causing a condition of irritation of the esophagus, hoarseness of voice, as well as reflux acid, which causes a lot of discomfort. The third condition in which they are useful is ZES or hyperacidic condition is known as Zollister-Ellison syndrome. This occurs due to tumor of the gastrin secreting cells in the pancreas, which in turn lead to excessive gastric acid production in the stomach. The adverse effects of PPIs. Mostly the PPIs are well tolerated. However, some side effects are seen on long-term use. These side effects include achlorhydria, that is lack of acid in the stomach. then increased bacterial flora due to increase in the pH of the stomach. Third is its interference with absorption of some nutrients which include iron, calcium as well as vitamin B12. So it leads to vitamin B12 deficiency, and decrease in the absorption of calcium and other ions leads to an increased risk of hip fractures. It is important to understand the structure and activity relationship of PPIs. We have seen that the basic nucleus, that is pyridinyl, methyl, sulfinyl, benzimidazole, is the basic structure and it is essential for activity. Any change in this structure leads to decreased or loss of activity. Let us see the various substituents that can be allowed on the pyridine ring. It is seen that the substituents which increase the basicity of the pyridine ring, that is, the electron donating substituents, are good for activity, like the methoxy substituent. The presence of electron withdrawing substituents like the nitro, methylsulfinyl or trifluoromethyl substituents reduce activity. The methyl substituent at the meta position has an inductive effect and therefore promotes the activity. The resonance effect also increases the electron density on the nitrogen and leads to the increase in activity. This is the resonance structure of the pyridine ring with methoxy substituted on position 4 and methyl group substituted on the meta position. The substituents that are allowed or favored on the benzimidazole ring include electron donating groups on position 5 like methoxy or difluoromethoxy substituent, which leads to an optimum balance between the chemical stability and activity. Therefore, we may say that the benzimidazole ring leads to an activity as well as chemical stability, because most of the PPIs suffer from the limitation of chemical instability. So presence of methoxy group gives a good balance between stability and activity. In the end, let us see the synthesis of one of the representatives of PPIs, that is omeprazole. This synthesis involves condensation of the alkyl chloride derivative of the substituted pyridine moiety and the thiol derivative of the substituted benzimidazole part. These two condense in the alkaline pH to give the sulfide derivative. This sulfide derivative is in turn oxidized using MCPBA, that is metachloroperbenzoic acid, to give the omeprazole.